Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour, all at undefeatable prices every day. Shop at Academy locations throughout Ohio, including Zanesville, Springfield, and Boardman. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Go to Academy Sports and Outdoors, academy.com right now. Happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. We're just two days away from Ohio State and Texas, the big top three matchup inside the horseshoe. That's Mick Walker on the other side of your screen, feeling a little under the weather, fighting the elements. No clue where an August cold comes from, but an August cold cannot keep our guy Mick Walker down. He's going to break down a lot on the recruiting trail with me, Spencer Holbrook. I'm just Spencer Holbrook, if you haven't heard. And we're going to talk Ohio State recruiting. Mick, huge recruiting weekend this upcoming weekend. Maybe you've just been running so ragged that your immune system is fighting back. Whatever the case may be, is this what you expected? We don't need to get into names just yet. Is this what you expected when you knew that Ohio State, Texas was going to be on the calendar?
Yeah, as much as I would imagine Mark Pantoni, Ryan Day, like the whole recruiting department, recruiting staff would rather it be smaller so it can be more intimate and you can get like a certain amount of time with each position coach and each top target that actually comes on campus. This is the way it had to be. When you're hosting a top three matchup and you can get all these guys on campus, it's early in the season, so some of these guys haven't started their high school football seasons yet. So, yeah, you have to get 100 guys, 115 guys is what I think they're looking at right now. But that's just kind of how you have to do it when you have one of these big season opening matchups. Clemson's going to be the same way on their own scale because Clemson obviously recruits to a smaller scale than Ohio State. But any of these big opening weekends are going to be loaded. Florida State will be the same way, and that's just kind of how it has to be.
I think Florida State should opt not to host a lot of recruits when they're playing Alabama. But I get it. All right, Mick, let's just dive right in. Hey, if you're a member of the Penn State recruiting class and the class of 2027, you might as well just come on because there's already 2 Penn State commits going to be on campus for Ohio State this weekend. There's a couple other commits. I think there's an Oregon commit that's going to be kicking around. That's got to make Dan Lanning pretty happy. It's a pretty loaded group, Mick, kind of headlined by those flip targets. We'll get into the regular targets in a second, but like you see a bunch of flip targets on the docket. That's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, they're all kind of coming with part of this 24K 7-on-7 organization that Jameer Brown plays with. And obviously you mentioned Penn State commits. That's 5-star running back Keemon Spell from McKeesport, who we saw last weekend when I went out to Pittsburgh. We had a great story with him yesterday, just kind of talking about his thoughts on Ohio State, his thoughts on Ryan Day. He spoke very glowingly about the program and the head coach. The other guy is Khalil Taylor, the near 5-star top 50 type wide receiver from the Pittsburgh area as well. He plays at Pine Richland now, but I believe he transferred in this offseason. But they've offered Keemon Spell. They've been recruiting him for a while. They haven't offered Taylor. I don't know if that'll come this weekend, but it could be interesting if it does. Like you said, though, Penn State's got 3, I believe, 2027 commitments, or maybe 4 at this point, and 2 of the 3 or 2 of the 4 will be on campus this weekend as the Buckeyes kind of work these flips or at least get the ball rolling a little bit. Same with Keyshawn Bowman, like you mentioned, the top 50 Oregon wide receiver commit from Nashville who kind of unexpectedly committed to the Ducks this summer. Devin Jordan, the assistant wide receiver coach at Ohio State's continued to stay in there, kind of continue to recruit. And he's another guy I'm excited to see next week before the Grambling game because since we have a little bit more freedom compared to traveling before the Texas game, I'm going to be headed down to Nashville to see Keyshawn Bowman and David Gabriel Georges, who we'll talk about later when it comes to the uncommitted guys. But that's going to be a matchup between 2 top Ohio State targets after we get through this matchup between 2 top 3 programs in Ohio State and Texas.
Wow. All right. That's a lot right there. I think we're good. Just get out. Mix feeling under the weather. We'll get him back in bed, and we'll make sure that he's rested up for Saturday. No, I'm just kidding. We got to keep talking, Mick. I apologize. All right. Let's talk the biggest names that are coming into town. David, I'm going to give you like a bunch of names here, and then you can take it wherever you want. David Gabriel Georges, Ohio State's number 1 running back target in 2027, even though Keemon Spell's the number 1 running back in 2027. You've got Manchin Sales, the 4-star wide receiver from Indianapolis, Lawrence North, 4-star Harper Woods, Michigan wide receiver, and Michigan legacy Dakota Garant is going to be in town. Libertyville, Illinois tight end, a 4-star Brock Williams. He's the number 1 tight end in the country according to Rivals. 4-star Pittsburgh Central Catholic offensive tackle Jimmy Kalis. I believe relation to former Michigan 0-5 against Ohio State man Kyle Kalis. So that's worth noting. Just of that group, because I think that's a pretty big, sizable group there, Mick. What are the feelings on some of those guys? I know everybody wants to talk about David Gabriel Georges because he's the top target there, but seems like this is a pretty loaded offensive group there coming to Columbus for this weekend.
Yeah, you kind of ran it down there. I think David. Well, I believe that I know that David Gabriel Georges is the top guy at the board at the running back position next year in 2027. He's going to be the guy that, even though they got Spell on campus or some of these other guys like a Ty Phillips who they really like from North Carolina, like when Saturday's done, win or loss, David Gabriel Georges and his family are going to be the family that kind of get to spend the most time with Carlos Loughlin and Tony Johnson. Same thing with Brock Williams. They've got a couple tight ends coming on campus, but he's the number one guy for Keenan Bailey in the 2027 class from Libertyville. I think Ohio State's probably at the top for both those guys. What if not just kind of running 1 and 2 with like maybe a Tennessee for David Gabriel Georges or a Georgia for Brock Williams. But this is kind of a visit where you can cement that top status heading into this offseason or heading through the season, where I think both these guys could be inclined to make more off-season January, February, spring commitments instead of taking it all the way until June, especially if Ohio State continues to prioritize those guys. And like you said, Jimmy Kalis, he's coming with his teammate James Halter. I saw both those guys last week in in-game. Very impressed. Jimmy Kalis I think he's been here 4 or 5 times this calendar year already. His sister's a student on campus, so he can obviously kind of pop in and has a place to stay consistently. His mom, Kristen, she's a very nice lady, and she's very pro-Ohio State, so that's going to help the Buckeyes as well, despite his kind of ties with his brother or his half-brother or whatever. Pardon the I don't know the exact relation between the two, but I believe it is half-brother, him and Kyle Kalis. Despite that connection, Jimmy's still very interested in Ohio State, and I think Ohio State leads for him as well. And then you look at those wide receivers, I don't know if they lead for either of them just because it's so hotly contested right now. I think Dakota Grant's kind of closer in his process with like kind of narrowing it down to a top group, and I think Ohio State's in that. Munchon Sales, he's kind of working his own process and doing his own thing at this point, but he's visited a couple times already. I think between those two, both of them are the top guy behind Jameer Brown, who's already committed, who also will be on campus this weekend. I would probably lead Sales after seeing him in August, but I think if Ohio State could pull either one of those guys, like you mentioned, that'd be landing a top target. So those are really the guys to know. And then even if he's kind of a name, his name's only 7 letters, so he kind of sneaks through here. We don't talk about him. We talk about Quay Ford, who's a 5-star, like near top 5-star kind of caliber offensive tackle from Texas, Texarkana, I believe he's coming up. It's going to be his first visit, so that's a big one. And then Chad Simmons reported this morning that Kelsey Adams is a near top 100, I believe, offensive tackle from the Atlanta area. Both those guys are coming up, which for their first visits, which is big, obviously, for Ohio State, just getting them up here to get them on campus, and you kind of lead it into the offseason and into the next summer as well.
So let's go to the defensive side of the ball, because this defensive group is sheesh. I mean, you're talking about a loaded group. 4-star Chicago Brother Rice defensive lineman Braden Parks, 4-star Columbus Academy right here in Central Ohio edge Reynaldo Perez. I think that is an Ohio State lean. We'll talk about that later. 4-star Chesterfield, Virginia Lloyd C. Bird edge Chris Whitehead, who's one of the top targets in that class. Good Counsel. Everybody who follows Ohio State recruiting knows Good Counsel. 4-star edge from Good Counsel Anthony Sweeney, one of Ohio State's top targets there. He's going to be on campus. 4-star Cincinnati Anderson cornerback Ace Alston's going to be on campus. Interesting because he didn't camp at Ohio State this summer, but he wants to come to the Texas game. I know that's stunning. So we'll see how that goes. I know that there's been some, not friction there between Ohio State and him, but we'll see where that relationship goes just because he didn't camp this summer. And I think there were some people at Ohio State who really wanted to see him camp. One of my favorite players in the entire cycle is 4-star Indianapolis Warren Central safety Caleb Elkins. I think he's just an elite player. And I think Ohio State is in a really good spot with him right now. He's going to be on campus for this game to watch Caleb Downs in person. And then you really can't do any of this without mentioning him, even though he's not like a 5 or a 4-star guy. Hollywood, Florida, Chaminade Madonna prep athlete Angelo Smith. Yes, if that's Smith and Chaminade Madonna sounds familiar, that's because that's the brother of Jeremiah Smith, who has an Ohio State offer already. Angelo will be on campus to A, watch his brother, and B, become a recruit in the Ohio State lens. That defensive group, Mick, I know there's a lot more guys on that list, but we kind of just playing the hits here, going through the highlights. What do you think about this defensive group?
Yeah, I think Our colleague Jeremy Birmingham at Lettermen Row did a great job, I believe it was last week or maybe a couple weeks ago, kind of articulating that Ohio State is, and Mark Pantoni has even talked about taking this first-round pick approach and how you have to have these positions where you say, this cycle we need to go out and get a first-round pick at X, Y, and Z position. I think in this 2026 class, that was kind of safety and offensive tackle. That's why you got Blaine Bradford and then obviously Sam Greer, who's kind of vaulted himself up the rankings. Those are the positions they went out and spent big dollar on. And then obviously you get Chris Henry Jr., who will be back on campus this weekend. He's another guy that's worth a first-round pick type of deal when it comes to NIL-wise. Next cycle in 2027, I think that's running back, and I think that's defensive end as well. So you look at that, and that's why you have Chris Whitehead coming on. That's why you got Anthony Sweeney coming on. Like you mentioned, Ronaldo Perez, that's an in-state guy that you hope you can kind of get in early and have him as one of the leaders of this defensive line class. Jace Brewer is a talented guy at Indianapolis who's got a ton of offers. He visited Ohio State in the spring. Does not have the Ohio State offer yet, but I think that could be coming. And then I really like Braden Parks, the 4-star defensive lineman out of Chicago. He's a shorter guy, kind of a Jarquez Carter, who we spent a lot of the offseason talking about, but he's a shifty guy in the middle of the defense, and he was dominant at camp this summer for Ohio State. And then, like you said, from there, not a lot of linebackers in this group. James Laurinaitis, if you go to the Lettermen Lounge message board, you look for our in-season visit thread, you're going to see that a lot of the linebackers are coming on November 1st against Penn State. I don't know if that's just scheduling-wise, but that's kind of how James Laurinaitis lined it up. So then you kind of move to defensive back, and Angelo Smith, obviously, he had a good game this past weekend against St. Francis Academy. Chaminade lost, but he still looks very good in that game. Caleb Elkins, like you said, he's another guy, I think, Ohio State from Indianapolis that not only do they love, but I think they could get in the class early if they really kind of push. Maybe he comes out of this weekend thinking about things a little bit extra and a little bit more. And then we mentioned Chris Henry Jr. a minute ago. Mater Dei canceled their game on Friday, or had their game canceled because they believe the other team forfeited, which allowed Chris Henry Jr., Caden Dixon-Wyatt to come up. And then obviously the two 2027 guys when you talk about there are Aaron Washington and Danny Lang, the 2027 defensive backs. I think both those guys are kind of top 5-ish guys on Tim Walton's board, but when it comes to the cornerback position, especially Aaron Washington, he's kind of recovering from an injury right now, but he's been a guy that Walton's loved for a while. So to get him back on campus, same thing. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name fully because I don't know it entirely, but it's 4-star safety Isla Wiley Ava. I did actually try and pronounce it, but he's a 4-star safety from St. John Bosco. He's coming up this weekend, same type of thing. He can kind of get out before they fully get underway with all their Trinity League action at St. John Bosco. So we've talked about the new kickoffs and lambasted about, whether it hurts recruiting or helps. If you get them early enough, these big week 1 games, you can kind of get guys on campus before their season gets rolling, and that's what we got this weekend across all positions, really.
Yeah, it just sucks because sometimes you either have to get them in week 1 or you have to get them in November. And the last thing you want to do is host these Southern California guys in November. I mean, it's simple geography. So I think that's interesting. We're going to take a quick break right now, hear from a word from our partners and myself, and we'll be right back. That's Mick on the other side of your screen. We'll be right back. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour, all at undefeatable prices every day. Shop at Academy locations throughout Ohio, including Zanesville, Springfield, and Boardman. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Go to Academy Sports and Outdoors, academy.com right now. All right, we're back on the recruiting edition of this year program as we break down Ohio State and Texas, just a couple days away here on a Thursday. That's Mick Walker. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Of course, you guys already know that because you've been tuned into the first half of this program. Let's talk recruiting bold predictions, Mick. We make bold predictions on Friday for the regular Buckeyes. How about we make some bold predictions on potential future Buckeyes or not future Buckeyes and future college football players? Let's do some recruiting bold predictions, shall we? We can get as weird as we want in this part of the show. Stretch out, Mick. Have a good time. Let's see what we can get done here. What's your first bold prediction for this weekend, Mick?
I'm going to say that David Gabriel-Georges says that Ohio State leads in his recruitment coming out of this weekend. Not just because I think we've talked to people that know the running back position well at Ohio State, or we talked to people inside the program that are recruiting that know of we're recruiting David Gabriel-Georges and kind of know where the Buckeyes stand in that recruitment. But every time I've talked to David, I think that he's really spoken highly of Ohio State. I believe both his parents are coming up this weekend along with family, aunts, uncles, and his uncle's a big Ohio State fan from what I've been told. So getting him on campus again for the third visit this offseason or this calendar year, I think the Buckeyes come out of it leading for that 4-star running back from Tennessee by way of Canada.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to stick on the offensive side of the ball. And I am going to say that Ohio State comes out of this weekend with Brock Williams on commit watch. I think they are going to make a huge impression on him this weekend. I think he will see Nate Roberts out on the field a little bit. You can play against the number one team in the country as a true freshman at Ohio State. You don't have to go to Georgia to be a tight end. You can watch Max Clare become an X factor for Ohio State immediately as Texas takes so much attention on Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. And if they play it too high, I pity them because of what Max Clare can do down the seams. I just think Max is going to have a good game, which stay tuned for Friday's bold predictions. We'll see what happens there. And I think Brock Williams is going to take note of that, and I think he's a guy who wants to get this decision made sooner rather than later. If we know what we know about him, he wants to be locked in with the school and start to peer recruit. I don't think that we will be considering him an Ohio State commit at the end of this weekend, but I think he will have a good enough impression where we say, like, hey, it wouldn't surprise me if he committed. And so I'm going to say that coming out of this weekend, he's one of those guys that we're just kind of thinking, hey, that could be something that happens soon. And that, you're the intel guy. If that's completely off base, that's fine. That's why these are called bold predictions. But yeah, I just think that Ohio State's going to make a really good impression on Brock Williams this weekend.
No, I think that's 100% on base. This is a guy similar to David Gabriel George's different position that they prioritized for a while. Got on campus a couple times. He got on campus this summer to be around Brady Edmonds, the 2027 Ohio State quarterback commit. Brady can't make it this weekend because of a different change in his high school football schedule, but he'll be on campus next weekend, and I imagine he'll be sending some texts out to Brock and kind of just building that relationship along with him. And like you said, I imagine Brock after the game, win or lose, will get to meet Nate Roberts, talk to Nate Roberts a little bit. Even though Will Kazmarek, who's from St. Louis, that same general area in the Midwest, I think he would really hit it off with a guy like Brock Williams and kind of just tell him about how Ohio State and Keenan Bailey have shaped him, along with what Max Clare could say. So I'm all in on them leading for Brock Williams and leading for David Gabriel Georges. Like I said, I think those are the two singular most top targets coming on campus this weekend.
Nick, what's your next recruiting bold prediction?
Okay, let's see. It's hard to predict a commitment for guys, but I will say I could see, it's bold predictions. So I'll say I think Mason Wilt commits to Ohio State in the week after this visit, and within the 48 hours to a week out. Maybe I'm totally off base and totally wrong, but I think Mason Wilt, he's not ranked yet, but he's a really talented offensive lineman from St. Clairsville, Ohio, just right on the border of Ohio and West Virginia, all the way out there in the east in the Pennsylvania area. But I really think Ohio State likes him after what he showed in the summer, and I think he's a guy that doesn't have a ton of offers. I think he appreciates Ohio State, the brand, the prestige of the program, kind of grew up watching it. So I think he's somebody that, when it's all said and done, kind of getting there, getting that environment, says, you know what, gets around like a Max Riley, gets around Sam Greer this weekend and says, you know what, I want to be a Buckeye and I'll just shut it down right now.
Wow. All right. I'm going to go same general direction, but I'm going to go with Caleb Elkins. I think that guy is a Matt Guerreri safety. And
right.
Yeah, that's right. And so there's no reason to wait. If something is going to be done eventually, it might as well be done now. He's a Midwest kid. Obviously, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, all the Midwest culprits are in on him. But I think Ohio State and Caleb Downs and Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford are going to show him what it's like to play safety at Ohio State. And I think he's going to jump at that opportunity. And I don't know if that's going to happen right away. But I think that if he does end up at Ohio State, we will look back. I guess this is my bold prediction. If he does end up at Ohio State, we'll look back at the Texas game as the reason why.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a case like whether it is Mason Wilt or case of Caleb Elkins or David Gabriel Georges or Brock Williams or Jimmy Kalis, like a lot of these guys we've mentioned throughout the show, maybe they don't commit to Ohio State this week or this month or in September before their junior seasons are over. But I think when we look back at this season here in 6 months or at this game in 6 months or 7 months or in the summer already, we're going to go, he was visiting for the Texas game. He visited for the Texas game, and talk about all these guys that kind of got up here and got an initial impression of Ohio State, or at least got to see what it's like inside the shoe. So it's a big recruiting weekend for just that, just the presence, whether it's win or loss, kind of getting to see the environment, spend time with the coaching staff, and get a little bit more insight into how Ohio State is on a game day.
All right, any others? You got any others? I'm curious, Mick. If you got a third, you can have a third. I'm going to have a third, but you don't have to.
It's not super bold, but I do think Jace Brewer, the 4-star defensive lineman who I mentioned from Indianapolis, I think he ends up getting an offer to kind of build out this defensive line board. He's a talented edge player. He's a little bit on the stockier side, kind of like a Caden Curry, who's also from the greater Indianapolis area. I don't think Center Grove's necessarily Indianapolis, but it's right around that same area. I think he could be somebody that we end up talking about more after he gets an offer this weekend or sometime in the near future.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one to end on. I'm going to end with a bang. I think Ohio State will lead for Dakota Grant at the end of this week. Look, I know that Michigan is going to end up doing what it needs to do, if you will, to ensure that Bryce Underwood has weapons around him in the next recruiting class and in the recruiting class that follows. But, man, it is not comparable with wide receiver production between the two programs. And if this becomes an Ohio State-Michigan recruiting battle, even as a legacy, I think Ohio State is going to do a lot of what it needs to do to ensure Dakota Grant that he belongs in the Ohio State class. And whether it's shifting philosophy that Ohio State is beginning to do to making him comfortable turning heel, I guess, and becoming a villain, a la Jordan Marshall, I just think that is really hard to turn down. And so maybe it flips back the other way at some point in the 2025 season. I probably would assume that it will. But coming out of the Texas game, I think you're going to hear some glowing things about Dakota Grant and Ohio State. And I think Ohio State's going to make sure that he knows what a priority he is. Because, you know what? When Michigan started to turn the tide of the rivalry, they started to poke Ohio State in recruiting. Now, Ohio State hasn't turned back the tide of the rivalry yet. But I think that one thing Ohio State can do is start to make Michigan feel a little bit more uncomfortable on the trail when Michigan seems to be riding high. And so we'll see. But I think they're going to make Dakota Grant know that he's a priority coming out of this weekend.
Yeah, I really like that one. Dakota, his father Gerald, his whole family are big Ohio State people, just not in the sense that they grew up rooting for Ohio State, but they're big on Brian Hartline and the development, the wide receiver production at Ohio State. So that's a good one. And before we kind of wrap it up here, because I know we're going a little bit longer than what we normally like to do on these recruiting podcasts, but we'll touch on some of these 2028s. But I know here in 2028 for fans, it's like, oh man, that's so far away. But there's some big time guys coming up on campus. Champ Mons, the 2028 quarterback, who I thought was the best 2028 quarterback that camped at Ohio State this summer. He was at one of the 7-on-7 camps and absolutely lit it up. He'll be on campus this weekend. Eric McFarland, who was arguably the best wide receiver that camped at Ohio State all summer as well. Like, he was electric, and I think Spencer could even talk a little bit about him because he got to see him a little bit more that day. But Eric's a talented guy. And then Jameer Weiss, the 4-star defensive lineman from Trotwood Madison High School, like, he's the next star defensive player from Ohio. So those are 3 guys in 2028 that we probably need to mention and talk about, or at least mention at the end of this podcast when we discuss the whole visitors list.
Yeah, I mean, I think Weiss has a chance to be like the next 5-star defensive prospect from Ohio. We don't see those guys very often anymore. Sonny Styles, C.J. Hicks being the last 2, I believe.
Yeah, and then Jack Sword, obviously. There's a good run there for a couple of years. It's been silent and a little bit more dormant recently, though. Yeah,
I mean, and hey, let's not completely dismiss Aaron Scott, who is still working through his development at Ohio State and was I think the 34th best player in the country, or 35th. So he was right there on the borderline of being a 5-star. So, there's him. But I think, like, you talk about top 20 national players, top 15 national players, I think Jameer Weiss has a chance to be that. And so to get off on the right foot with him would be really strong. Really strong stuff from Ohio State. And I think the Buckeyes will make an impression on him. I think they realize how good he can be. Right now, Rivals industry ranking has him as the number 9 overall player. 63rd on Rivals. He's 9th on 24/7. So, like, you're getting a little bit of variance there, but that's to be expected with the 2028s. They're just now entering, what is that, year 2 of high school football for them. And so, I'll definitely feel old at some point this year when we're talking about 2029s. I think I need to go grab my cane right now to talk about these 2028s. Man, it's crazy talking about some of these guys who were, learning their ABCs when I graduated high school. But what are you going to do, Mick? That's life. We're all going to die eventually, Mick.
Precisely. And you look at that 2028 class, I think there's some legacies in it. Jet Harrison's in it. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s younger brother, he's in that class. Eric Weddle's oldest son, or one of his sons, is also a highly ranked safety. So, like, you're talking about former NFL guys. Cooper Witten, who's the son of, why am I blanking on his name?
Jason Witten.
Yeah. Jason Witten, the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys and Tennessee Volunteers. He's going to visit later this season. There's legacies. I think I even saw somebody tweet out yesterday that in 2029 in Texas, there's a DeMarcus Ware Jr. already coming up. That's going to be a 2029 prospect. So his father got inducted into the Hall of Fame in the past couple of years, so now his son's coming up through high school. And legacies are going to be a big thing. The talent on the field at Ohio State is going to be a big thing. And as Spencer can tell you here as he closes it out like a professional, like he always does, Lettermen Row is going to be a big thing with all the coverage we'll have from all this after the weekend. Breaking news: Lettermen Row doing the Lord's work on the Ohio State beat. That's what we like to try to do, at least. That's Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. He's the superstar of this here program. Mick's going to go blow his nose and hop into bed. I'm just going to go keep pounding away, working at lettermenrow.com. Mick's going to do that too. He doesn't sleep. He just powers down in the corner like a robot. Alex Gleitman on the recruiting side, Jeremy Birmingham on the recruiting side, Mick Walker on the recruiting side. You find me a better trio other than Brandon Innes, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith, I'll call you a liar, because I know that's not true. Those guys are the best in the business at what they do. Austin Ward and I trying to keep pace covering the team over at Lettermen Row. Come hang out, $1 for your first week. We're no longer doing that $1 through the Texas game because that doesn't make any sense when we can just offer you $1 for a week. You get all the aftermath of the Texas game as well, whether it's day of celebration on Sunday or the day of reckoning. We'll see what happens. But for now, we're just going to go get back to work over at lettermenrow.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hit that little subscribe button below. It really helps us. Make sure to leave a comment, whether you love us or hate us. Just tell us what you think. And then we'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.